I just finished up welding the subframe for the FRS and plating it up since we did cut half of it off for the S13 rack. So it's in there now. Let me show you what I got going on here. I basically, what you just saw me do was I put a plate here. This is a pretty thick metal. I just had it laying around. It's a main plate there that the tube clamps are welded to. They're fully welded around here. And then I have another piece here. This is to act as a jack point and just to brace this up. I have to add one more piece. I'm going to add one more piece of metal from here to here just to make sure these things cannot move at all. The next thing I did here is obviously plating and making boxing. Everything is the strongest thing you can do when you're working with metal. So that's just kind of my thought behind all this, is I just try to box everything as good as I could. I'll put a plate here, put a plate there, put a plate there, and put a plate there, and just weld them around basically. I can't really put anything over here because that's where the rack sits. The only thing that worries me about this is where the engine mount bolts to. There's really not too much stress on these. They're actually double plated from the factory, so I don't think I'm gonna have a single issue with that, to be honest. But if it does end up flexing, then I'll have to figure out something for that, but I don't really think it will with all this plate here. So yeah, this is what I got going on here. I'm gonna basically from here I'm gonna weld one more piece in right here, just as a precaution, and then I plan on priming the whole thing. Probably gonna grind down some stuff here, just grind down these welds a little bit, because this is where the tie rod sits. Let me throw the rack in here real quick. Try to do it one-handed for you. So this is how it sits here. It is real tight there. I'm probably gonna have to grind that down, as that is a little too close. But besides that, everything does look pretty good. I actually made some clearance right there for the fittings for the rack. So it should work, and we should be okay. This is actually going to have, so I did some more research in getting this rack in here, and instead of using longer tie rods like I was going to, the problem with that is the S13 rack is so much like smaller in diameter and like width than the stock FRS rack. The stock FRS rack came up to like here, then the tie rod started. So if we put a longer tie rod on it, it's just gonna create more like, the tie rods are going to turn more. They're going to be more of an angle, and it might even clip this. So to compensate that, the WiseFab kit to do this, they use like a special machine rack spacer, which it bolts in between here and the tie rod, which is going to push the tie rod forward about like 2 inches. So I went ahead and I bought some WiseFab those spacer things for the rack. So that's going to push the tie rod like where the tie rod screws into way further out to where it was like stock with the stock FRS rack. So that should be more like stock geometry, and the tie rod's not going to articulate that much once we have that in there. So I'm waiting on that in the mail, but I still have a ton more to do on this thing. So I'm going to finish up just welding that one piece in. I'm going to paint this real nice, and we'll do some more fitment with the steering column, but then I just got to final weld up the steering column U-joints. And it should be all ready to go, and we just got to figure out some line situations. I'm probably going to have to go get some custom made at a hydraulic company, but after that, I'll take you guys through the whole process there, and we should have hydraulic steering finally. Alright, so what's up guys, I just got my packages from WiseFab, and I ended up getting a set of tie rods. These are the WiseFab tie rods for the FRS kit. So the FRS kit, like I said, they use the S13 rack in the WiseFab kit, but there's geometry is different, so their mounting is completely different. But to get that to fit, they have these spacers, which I've been hunting down for a while to make things work. Since the rack is offset, one side is longer than the other, but basically you need these to get the rack to work, because the tie rods just have to be so long. So, and then I also recommend getting the WiseFab tie rods. They're 13 inches, which I just measured, which seem to be the longest ones I can find on the market. The next tie rods I saw that would probably be the closest to this are the GK Tech, which I think they're about 12. So now what I have is the FRS rack, the S13 rack over here. I took the tie rods I had off of it, and we're going to throw these on. I'm going to Loctite them and just pop them in here. This side, it's obviously closer on this side because that's where it needed to be for the steering shaft. So the small side is going to go right here. It's going to thread in. And then we're going to have the longer side right here. And basically all these are just extenders, and then the tie rods bolt right into there, and it should be all good. The next thing is I'm waiting on my special paint to come in for the subframe, but here it is. It just needs painted. I did throw a little bit of paint on it and then changed my mind. I ended up buying this stuff called Steel It. If you haven't heard of it, it's like really durable paint. A lot of off-road guys use it. It's weldable, it's weld through, and it's kind of like powder coat in a can. So I'm waiting on some of that to come in, because that will just like hopefully it'll make this subframe last forever and nothing will ever rust on it, which is the plan. And maybe if it's good enough, I'll paint the entire cage with it. So we'll see here. But I'm gonna get those installed, and we'll the next thing you'll probably see me is paint this subframe, and we'll throw the rack in it and get it installed in the car. Alright, so I just coated the subframe in this stuff called Steel It. If you haven't heard of it, it's kind of like stainless steel in a can. And it's really durable, like close to powder coat, but like in a spray paint can. So I recommend picking up some of that if you were doing the same thing. I really like it. Yeah, it's just all painted now. I'm letting it dry, and now that it's all painted, I can reinstall the rack and get it in the car, and we can finally test everything together and get the wheels to move again. Alright, so huge update on the whole S13 power steering setup for the FRS. This video is kind of spanned over like 2 months, so sorry if there's like some things that I missed in the whole process, but I'm gonna try to catch you guys up to speed. So along like a lot of the time I spent I made this video like span such a long time was just finding the right parts. There's not a lot out there for it, so I kind of just had to do my own like research on it, and I've went through a lot of tie rods. That's been the hardest thing so far. So I have like 4 or 5 sets of tie rods over here, and thankfully I'll show you guys what works. You guys don't have to go through the trouble I did. So I think in the last video you saw me finish up welding the subframe. So I ended up welding the subframe back together, reinforced it with the tube clamps on there. It's tight, everything. I coated it with, it's in the car right now. Everything looks great. I also redid a little bit of my steering. So here's what I have now, the column. I redid this bracket because with the other bracket I had, there really wasn't that much room for like a dash. Like I'm gonna put a race pack in this thing, and there really wasn't that much room with like it being so big. So this is a little bit lower profile, and it mounts in here. And just a little tip, I've seen this set up on a couple like FD cars and a lot of race cars. They do like the notches to one tube here, and you could do it. So I ran into the problem when I was doing this. I could not figure out how you tighten the bolt up here. So there's a bolt that goes through here. You cannot fit a socket here. This is 1.5" tube. The solution would be either use bigger tubing, which I didn't want to, but you can't fit a bigger socket in here to like tighten these 2 bolts together. So what I ended up doing was, I didn't do this on camera, but I welded a socket onto the nut. So there's another one of these in there, and I welded a socket onto it. And then so it comes up to here, and that way I could tighten it, because there's like no way to tighten it. Nobody ever shows how to do that, so that's hopefully a little tip there if you want to do something like this. But we've got the Woodward column in there with the nice firewall bushing there, just spot welded into place over there. So and then everything in here is going to be painted, mind you, but this is just it before I rip everything out. We've got the nice Woodward quick release. I don't know if I can do this one-handed, but it pops in. It's a pretty nice setup. And put that back. I'll show you guys what you guys really are here to look at. So here we go. Right now, let me go over the parts I have right now. So these are WiseFab tie rods for the FRS, their FRS kit. What you need is these right here. So these are WiseFab rack extenders. These are sold with the WiseFab kit for the FRS. You need these because the rack, the S13 rack is significantly shorter than like the FRS rack that would normally come to here. So you could either do 2 things. You could either put the tie rod all the way back there and then run like a longer extended section out here. But the thing I saw with that is, look how far this thing has to travel back on the subframe. So if you're at like full lock and this tie rod is like bent here, you're gonna run into contact issues with this. So that's why they designed this. So I figured the engineers at WiseFab did that for a reason. So you can actually buy these from WiseFab. WiseFab sells all their parts separate. These were actually pretty cheap. I want to say they're like $30. So they're actually different lengths. So this one is shorter than the other side. And that's because the rack is offset with the whole like steering setup. I mean with the U-joint setup. So this side is shorter than the other side. But once you get that in there, so, but you can see it lines up pretty well. It's in a good spot. Here you can kind of see my U-joint set up through there. Let me get on the ground real quick for you guys, and I'll show you kind of more in-depth look. So here's the other side. It's mounted here. It's pretty, it adds a lot more clearance here with the oil pan with the LS, if you have an LS swap, so that's kind of nice. But just kind of sits down here in the back. Let me go to the other side and I'll show you it with like the clearance. So one thing I haven't done yet is put the lines in for the rack. That's what I'm working on right now. But that's the only thing that I'm a little scared about, but I'm pretty sure I'll be fine. So here's the Woodward U-joint going to our rack. We have the ISR rack, Nissan rack, like AN lines, which are nice. And then right here is the two fittings for the S13 rack that I'm gonna have to go to the pump. So I cut a big section out of this to allow for the fittings to come through. We're gonna put 90s, and then I'm gonna convert these to AN lines. And if you're gonna do this, they sell special AN fittings for this. People make like special AN fittings for this. I bought mine from Chase Base, but they're longer than normal and they have an O-ring. So don't try to put a normal power steering fitting or AN line into this. It won't work. So if you're gonna go to AN line, you have to get a special AN fitting. So make sure you do that. And then my plan here is, so that's in the car. I had made this bracket over here. This paint's still drying, or I'll show you in the next clip, but that is what's gonna hook up to our power steering pump. And our power steering pump, if I can find it, is, here it is over here. It's an MR2 power steering pump, like I had said, and it will go right here. This is just the best place I kind of found for it. That bracket allows me to put it right here. I made it, and it's gonna sit right there. So one of the issues with that, in my case, I don't know if you guys have the same issue, but I didn't really want to put it like here, because I kind of like the look of it being open, especially when you like take the car to like car show or something like that. You can kind of see in there, and it doesn't like clutter up the view. Another thing with the wheels turning, I didn't know if it would hit if I dropped it down, because my tires do almost like rub the frame rails, so I didn't want that. And then there's an ABS unit here, which I'm getting rid of, but that was also there. So I wanted to put it right here. Figured it was a good spot. One issue I have is with this bracket I have, it's hard for me to show you, but I'm hitting the alternator right now. I have a low mount alternator. Like I said, this is just kind of my application. And this is hitting. So I'm actually going to cut this off and weld a AN6 fitting onto this anyways to adapt to my power steering lines. So we'll be fine for that, but it'll just be real tight. But this is a good spot to mount it as well, because there are pre-holes in the chassis. This is a 12 and that's a 10. So I made my bracket just attached to that. It bolts right on there, and then we're gonna run our lines to that, and then we'll have a reservoir somewhere over here. And that should wrap it up for the steering. It's been a long video, I'm sure. And it's been a long like couple months trying to figure it out, but I think I finally did. Hopefully this will help you guys. I'll make sure to show it in the car, and we'll get it hooked up and running. But as far as like engine swap wise or whatever, this setup should be pretty universal, because I am running the electric pump, so you can put that on any engine. And I've heard good things about these, so we'll have to see. As well, I also have a cooler, so you can put these things wherever you want, really. I've heard you people can put them in the trunk, which I would like to do, but it's kind of really expensive with power steering lines and everything to run it all the way to the back. And I'm just trying to keep things cheap, so I ended up getting, people say you don't need a cooler or you need a cooler. It's kind of like a debate, but I got a cooler anyways. This is just a cheap cooler I got. It's AN6. And I think I got this off of eBay really, really cheap. So you can just get these. And since I'm running such short lines, I figured I'd get a cooler. So I'll have it go through here as well. Everything will be kind of contained on this side. And we'll put some heat sleeve on the power steering lines because they're kind of close to the header. But they'll probably run up through here, attached to here, reservoir there, and well, a pretty nice setup. So I'm excited to see what it feels like. That was my only thing I hated about this car was the steering. So converting it to 240 steering should work pretty good. 240s drift pretty well, and people have a lot of good luck with it. So I'm excited to see what happens. All right, so I just got my shipment in from Chase Bays, and this is what I got. This is for a different project, but these are the fittings you'll need. They're on their website for the Nissan 240 steering rack. And then I have a third one. So there's two fittings on the steering rack. They're two different ones. And you need them long. They're like longer because a normal AN fitting would bottom out. And they also have an O-ring. And then conveniently enough, the other fitting is the exact same on the MR2 pump. So it's the exact same as the rack. So I just got another one of those for the MR2 pump. And then what I got here, I got these from eBay. They're just weld-on AN bungs. And what I plan to do is we're gonna weld the bung right there off of that. So it has a lot more clearance. We can put an AN hose on there. All right, so I just started working on my lines for the power steering mount. I ended up having to flip it. Ran into some issues with it contacting the alternator. So I just flipped my bracket around and I just have the pump upside down. It works in any orientation, doesn't really matter for that. I have my PTFE lines here. I bought these like pre-made because these lines are pretty expensive if you like get them custom made. So I found a set on like eBay that used from like a NASCAR team that was selling them. So I was able to get these to fit. They were a little long, so I kind of had to make do. These lines are really hard to bend as well. They're stainless steel, so I kind of just have this one like looping into here. I'll have to clean that up. And then the other one, so high pressure goes right off this fitting, goes directly into the bottom part of the 240 rack. This is the low pressure, comes all the way up through here, tucks underneath the pump, and then it goes right to our cooler right here. And then right from our cooler, this is going to go back over here to our can. Got this like Speedway can, and it holds, I think like a liter, so it should be a good amount. And I'm going to put it over here. I just think it looks the best over here. And I need to make like some bracket here to attach to the head. And then the return will go right into the top here. And then the bottom will go feed directly back into the pickup of the pump right here. So and that should be our complete system. And then there is a pigtail underneath here, which I will make a harness for, run it into the car. And that's how we will power it. I believe we only need these two wires. There is more, but that's for like the factory MR2 computer, which we don't need. So we'll wire this up as well. And we'll just snake it in there and connect to my relays in there. And we should have some power steering. I think I might order a clamp for this, one with like a bracket on it, just so it looks nice and just be able to hold. And then I'll fab up a little bracket. I gotta figure that out still. That will attach to the head. And then we can hopefully be done with this whole power steering thing and test it out. All right, guys, what's going on? I just finished up putting the rack, that 240SX rack, into my FRS here behind me. I probably missed some stuff in the video leading up to this, but I'm gonna go through the whole setup and I'll get you guys caught up to speed on the whole setup. All right, so here it is. The car probably looks a bit more put together than what you've probably seen in the video so far, because this is spanned over about like 4 months, but just as I've been working on it after work and stuff. So what the project here was, we got a 240SX S13 rack right down there. So we modify the subframe, everything to get it in there. Tie rod wise, so we're gonna cover that. So far, the issue I had was the WiseFab tie rods. I bought the FRS WiseFab tie rods that came with the FRS WiseFab kit. They're way too long for the PBM control arms. and the threads don't go back far enough. So like quick little fix I did is I took these to a machine shop, just got them thread back farther. And then that lets me use these to work. I believe these are Passat, like a 1998 Passat or 1996 Passat tie rod for a VW. And I'm told that a 2006 Passat has like the same thread pitch and everything, but it's shorter. So I'm gonna order those, try those as a spare, you know, cause I don't wanna have to go get my tie rods, I know, like turned every time I want, if I bend one. So it'd be nice to have those as a spare, but I can verify that this works as a method just temporarily. I mean, nothing's wrong with it, it's fine. Just, I mean, the threads, I guess, aren't as good as if, like, you know, you get a manufactured piece. So I do have the sway bar in there. It does fit. The only issue is, if you notice here, it's not connected down here, because if it were to be all the way up, there's not enough clearance for this to go back there. So easy fix. I'm just gonna get some washers and space this down a little bit, just so that can come down. That way we'll still have a sway bar, and it will still clear, the tie rod will still clear and everything. Another thing you need the WiseFab extended rack spacers here. That is gonna push this ball joint out past this. If you don't use this and just have a really long tie rod, when you turn, you're gonna hit the subframe itself when this ball joint turns. So everything else is stock PBM. If you notice that the way that the way the steering rack is exactly the same. The tie rod location is exactly the same as if you use the offset spacers from PBM. So this should be the exact same geometry, just with a hydraulic rack. Let me get a creeper real quick. I'll lock you down underneath here. Okay, next thing we have is my my Woodward steering column here. This just adapts it to the column right here. I'll have these in the description, hopefully the part number, but I just had to weld this piece. I made it because of the length of the U-joints, and then it goes up to the column over here. The rest of the subframe is pretty simple. It's cut out a lot, but when you guys can kind of get the idea, everything else is pretty much the same. So power steering lines, they come up through here. They're in AN6, and they're PTFE line, and they have nice heat shielding on them. I'm running a MR2 Toyota power steering pump. Right here, it's electric, hydraulic. So I mounted this, made this little bracket, put it to the frame rail, and we got basically the line here is bottom is high pressure. High pressure goes in. This is the high pressure line on the MR2 pump. Snakes down there. Goes into the pump. This is the low pressure, comes through here, goes through this cooler in the front. Boom, 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 boom. Made this nice little bracket, attached to my O cooler. Comes through here, back up to the reservoir up here, and then down here off the reservoir there is the inlet, which I welded an AN6 fitting onto the pump itself. Got some ATF fluid in here. I have yet to try, so I tested this, it works. Let me fire it up real quick. Back here as well. I'm gonna do a whole car walk around when the whole car's done, which should be in about a couple weeks, but got a fuel cell back here, tube rear. In some of my other videos, I covered that. Coming to the front. We're just gonna fire this up real quick. I just have the steering on a temporary switch right now. So it's running. I think it's still bleeding out some air. So that's all working. There's no leaks. Stoked about that. I have yet to like test the steering on the ground yet, so that's what we're gonna do next. Besides that, let me turn the power steering off. Sorry, this is just gonna be a one take. So that's all good. We'll go to the steering wheel real quick. So we got the column in here. Everything looks good. Let me go over some of the steering geometry stuff. So look, we're gonna go to full lock. This bar's in the way a little bit. So if you notice, the one thing that's kind of weird, it did over center a little bit. I believe the PBM kit over centers a little bit too. And if you're not familiar with that, that's when your tie rod goes inwards. See how it's like at an inward slope? That basically makes it so when you get to full lock, it's really hard to like self-steer out of it. You can't just like let off the wheel, kind of get stuck there. So fix for that, we have adjustable like bump stop here. So we're gonna tighten that out a little bit. Hopefully just to get it to like a point. We'll lose a little bit of angle, but nothing crazy. just to get it so it doesn't get stuck. I'll have to play around with it on like a test day, but should be plenty of angle. But everything, I mean, everything else looks like it's gonna work fine. This is a completely new setup, and I'm stoked to try it. In theory, it should all work good. But yeah, here's just a little walk around over the car before I put it on the ground and test the steering. Just a 5.3 in here, cammed, full bolt on pretty much. AccuSump, radiator, everything. So I'm excited to try it out. Most people would have went with like a hydraulic pump from like the LS, because I have the LS swap. I wanted to try the MR2 pump. I've heard good things about them. Cleans up my belts. You know, I don't have to have like my power steering, a longer belt and everything, deal with that. A lot of people burn up power steering pumps too. So I want to try the electric route. If this ends up sucking, I'll probably go to a KRC pump, which they're a lot more expensive than this whole setup, I believe, but we'll try it out. I've got good hopes for this. A lot of FD cars run these, and they have no issues. So hopefully this all works good. I'm going to drop it on the ground, and we're going to see if it works. All right, guys, so it's a couple days later. The car's a little bit more put together. I put it on the ground, test the steering, and a couple things I did were wrong. So I'm just going to tell you guys. All the line setup was right that I told you, that I showed. My wiring was actually backwards. So this connector, you can see there's like a yellow stripe and then a black stripe. It's swapped on the other side, like where it goes like red and black. So I had these two mixed up, so it was actually pumping into the fill. And then another thing is, it's hard for me to show you, but on the rack itself, there are two AN lines that go to like one side of the rack to the other. And I had those swapped, and that was pretty scary. Whenever you turn the wheel, it would just snap to lock, which was interesting. So it was like the high and low swapped on that. Fixed that. The steering's good. I have it up on jack stands right now. I'm finishing my exhaust. So I'm not really going to just put it back on the ground just to show you guys, but it does work really good. Just on battery, it doesn't really, I don't know, my battery's only like 12 volts right now. So just on battery, it doesn't like work too well just sitting there. That's what I thought at first. I was kind of scared. I was like, oh, this isn't even that good. Because it only could really turn to like half lock. But once the car's running, it's fine. It has perfect voltage, and the steering's super easy. I'm not going to start it because there's really no point with me being in the air, and it's open header right now, but I can show you. I just have this temporarily on a switch. It's hooked up to my ignition. So the thing is, this will be on like a switch panel. I'm going to put a switch panel here, and it'll be on a switch that's always on. So if I ever want to turn it off, and have ignition on to like, you know, work on like tuning or something like that, I can flip it off. I recommend doing that because it's just going to take up a lot of battery. But that way you don't got to worry about turning it on when you're like going to start or anything. You can just flip ignition and everything's ready to go, just like a normal car. So with it on though, works fine. It's a little noisy. Once the engine's running, you can hear it like kind of bog down like that when I turn it. When the ignition's on, it doesn't even do that at all. So it's really good. I recommend it. It is noisy, so keep that in mind. That's why a lot of people put it like in the back and stuff. But up here it's fine. I can't even hear it when my car's on. My car's pretty loud. But yeah, I really recommend it. I haven't drifted with it yet. Just so far, just driving. I mean, just like idling and moving. It's way better than the stock one was so far. I got to test out the geometry wise and everything, but I think we'll be okay, and I'm excited to feel how it see how it feels. I'll post a video when I drive this thing for the first time this year. It should be pretty soon. I'm just waiting on my exhaust to be finished. I'm waiting on some parts for that, and I gotta get the windshield in here, and that's about it really. And then one other thing I did, so I had showed you the clearance with the tie rod and the sway bar bracket. Turn this to lock. So what I ended up doing, I just put 3 big washers there, and it clears it perfectly. So that's just something you can do. There's 2 bolts on there. Put 6 washers, 3 on each bolt, and it will clear it perfectly. So that was a little fix I did for that. That way you can have a sway bar if you're into that. I like the sway bar for the front on this car. Without it, it just feels real delayed, the inputs. So maybe we'll change with this rack. I don't know. We'll see. But so far, pretty happy with everything that's happened.
over the off season, and I'm ready to get back driving.